The fight against human trafficking makes its way to central Minnesota. Meet a man on the front lines dedicating the last 2 decades to rescuing our kids. Next. Jaco Booyens, thank you so much for being here and for the important work that you're doing.
Liz, thank you. It's an honor to be on. Thank you.
No, we appreciate it so much. And we're going to talk about your upcoming visit to Minnesota here in just a moment. But I know this fight against child trafficking is a personal one for you. But explain that. Give us some background. Why is that?
Yeah, it's personal to us, and we really fight so that it doesn't become personal to American families. And unfortunately, it does. 1994, I was 18. My sister Ilanka was trafficked. She was 12 years old, raised by a single mother, very tight family. We didn't know it was trafficking at the time. And so that's when this journey started for us. Fast forward 28 years to 2023, and the crime has never been bigger. Sexual exploitation of minors has never reached these levels. And unfortunately, Liz, America is the number one leading nation demanding sexual exploitation of minors and women and men as well, adults. It's not just minors, but there's a particular focus on the trafficking of minors in the U.S.
Give us some statistics if you can, Yaku. How big a problem is this? And I think a lot of us in Minnesota, especially, they think, well, this can't possibly be happening here. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, there's not a single zip code in America where child trafficking has not been investigated. So number one, it's in every community. It's in the church, it's outside the church, it's in all the aisles of politics. Look, I say evil of this nature doesn't care whether you're Republican, Democrat, Black, white, Hispanic, South African immigrant to America. It doesn't care. It comes to steal, kill, and destroy. It's about the innocence of children, and it's about protecting that innocence. So it's in every community because people are vulnerable. Remember, trafficking is the exploitation of vulnerabilities through the mechanism of force, fraud, and coercion. People say, well, how strong is coercion? Can you really coerce a child on Instagram, on X, former Twitter, on Facebook? Can you really coerce a child to exploit themselves, to meet up with a predator? My answer is this: coercion is so powerful, the world was shut down through coercion in 2020. Every business, every nation, through messaging. Messaging is powerful. When the predator knows the vulnerability of the child, they can get that child to do anything. And our job is to fortify children before they get trafficked, to identify the vulnerabilities in communities. This event coming up is just that. It's say, look, it is in your community. Here's an organization called Terebinth Refuge. They do phenomenal work rebuilding the lives of the abused and the afflicted. We don't want to have to do that because it's not a solution to the problem. The solution to the American problem is we must once again as a nation return to living a moral lifestyle of protecting the innocent and the virtue of children, right? We have to return to sanity because we've lost our minds.
We are coming off the summer of The Sound of Freedom. So in a way, this has become a national conversation. Really scary, though, I think, to many of us to hear the hurdles that film even had to go through to make it that far into movie theaters. I'm curious your thoughts on the film and kind of that now what question. Now what do we do about all of this, Yaku?
Yeah, we consulted on the movie 3-4 years ago. I know Tim well. He's a good friend. They do incredible work, right? And under OUR, the work they do in foreign countries is phenomenal. We decided as an organization 28 years in 2012 to focus solely on the 50 states of the United States, on the American child. The awareness that was raised by the movie is what the design of the film was. It was to bring this shock and awe factor of, hey, trafficking does happen. The concern is the call to action to the local community, right, has to now happen. People cannot just think, well, it's the migrant child coming from Cambodia en route to the U.S. Put that aside. It is a minuscule percentage of trafficking. We're talking about the predominant trafficking victims are American-born children. It's Americans trafficking Americans. We are the number one nation on earth producing pornography. We're the number one nation on earth consuming pornography. We're the number one nation on earth by a long shot demanding sex with children. We're the number one nation on earth moving policy in the wrong direction, normalizing sex with children, lowering the age of consent, bringing things like comprehensive sex education into the classroom. We lead that conversation, not the French, not the Dutch, who has bold brothels in storefronts. America is leading the conversation on drag shows for kids, on parents taking their kids to drag shows. America is leading the conversation with the lowest age average of 12 to 14 sex trafficked, the lowest age average of entry into pornographic exploitation, boys age 8. The rest of the world is at 11. We lead every single chart on the exploitation of children, but we're the land of the free, the home of the brave, because morally, we have fallen morally, and we can fix this thing, Liz. But it is a 911 fire alarm. Yes, Cambodia. Yes, the Philippines. That's great. The United States of America, right here, we need to do a lot of work at home in Minnesota, in Dallas, Texas, in Atlanta, Georgia, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and speaking of that fire alarm, it's something that parents have to be involved with no matter what. Talk about that. I've heard you speak on this before, but just the role that social media is playing in all of this, and Gen Z as well, when kids have phones as early as, 8, 9, 10 years old.
It's a daunting task. It's shocking to think that we have smartphones in the hands of a 9-year-old. I want parents to understand this. I said it's the exploitation of vulnerabilities. The predator does the following. On average, they take 9 months to profile a child, which means they like posts. They study the child's profile. They learn their behavior. They're coming and going. They see what motivates the child. They understand the child's vulnerability and greatest desire. They learn the language that the child desires to hear. We're all human beings with a sign on our head that says, make me feel important. Every single human being. When the predator figures out what that child's desire and need is, it is game over, because the predator has direct access, because of social media, to the victim. So think of it this way now. Most of our cases today, there's no pimp. There's no pimp. The pimp is the facilitator, the coordinator, right? The guy that would have the girl on the street corner. And the pimp now is Instagram. It is X or Twitter. It is Facebook. It's the connector. The buyer of sex is now defrauding and coercing the victim for 9 months before they strike. It's like a predator in the Africa Serengeti stalks its prey. It takes time. It learns behavior. It looks for the little outcast. Which kid is on the fringes in the family? So now the child is being desensitized, coerced, defrauded at the dinner table, on the phone. Do you know that when I go to schools, and we've trained in person over 60,000 women and children this year alone, in person, when I take a child's phone and I say, see if this phrase is in any of your DMs, if this emoji is in any of your DMs, and I show that over 60% of children today have already engaged with a predator at some level. Now, the predator may have looked at that child and gone, this child is not vulnerable enough, I'm moving on to the next child. But they are active in your child's life today. The fastest growing platform where predators like to coerce and defraud children and traffic them is an app called Saturn. This is an app like the planet. This is an app that was designed for children to manage their school calendar and school schedule. This is where they put all their activities on. What time I have baseball practice, what time is math class, here's my break. Predators are moving into that app, and the exploitation is exploding. Any Pinterest, where you used to just pin things up, the day Pinterest opened up a chat room, predators move in. They move in because they've got communication. The number one platform trafficking boys is Xbox and PlayStation, where they play live games. The predator will play hundreds of hours of games with Johnny, talking to Johnny, coercing Johnny, learning his behaviors, planting seeds. Is he a soft target? And then they meet up, or they demand sexual exploitative material of the child. So parents are what I call the second line of defense. We can make the child the first line of defense if we inform the children how predators operate. But parents have to step into this thing, Liz. This thing is not fixed by law enforcement. It's not fixed by a president in the White House, okay? To think that one man in the White House can stop sex trafficking is as absurd as to think that that same man in the White House can stop divorce in a marriage. It's completely absurd. It's sexual immorality. It's pornography. It's 12-year-olds being addicted to porn. It's 12-year-olds forcing themselves on other 12-year-olds. We've got a problem. We've got a massive problem. And then there's dark forces that are working against us. Minnesota, go to the University of Minneapolis. Go study for yourself the amount of rape cases. Look how rape has skyrocketed, on some of those campuses, in those, Twin City communities. Go look at Minneapolis. Look at sex trafficking. Go look at the case load that's currently in that state. And it's every state, right? In Minnesota, 47% of all sex trafficking. Now, this is a riveting stat here. 47% of all sex trafficking in Minnesota is what's called familial trafficking, which means it's a family member or a trusted caregiver that's trafficking the child. We're talking about parents trafficking their own children. Most of our cases, we've had 13 rescues in the last 40 days of American children. 13 in the last 40 days, okay? Every single one of those had a familial component. None of them were kidnapping. None. This is, you're rescuing a child who's being trafficked from a parent, from a coach, a teacher. This is why the Sound of Freedom is great for awareness. But now it's like, okay, what's my call to action? Go to our website. Educate yourself on the signs of a child that's being exploited, their behavioral, their mood changes, how they speak, talk, react. What do I do if I see in a 7-Eleven, I think a child's being exploited? Who do I call? What books should be in my kids' schools? What books should not be in my kids' schools? There's 185 books on our website that are all exploitive, that are in American schools. And so why are the books so important? The book breaks down the barrier in the child's mind to talk about sex with adults. It desensitizes the child. The child doesn't have the ability to understand intent. So if Mr. Johnson at school talks to the child about oral sex in the classroom, then the child is going to talk to adults online about oral sex. A red flag won't go off. It's desensitizing the child to barriers, right? That's why it's so dangerous. So societally, stop thinking outside of your zip code. Think in your zip code. Your home, your street, your school board, your legislators of your state. Big problems in Minnesota. Huge. You guys you're moving in the wrong direction. In your capital, your House and Senate, they're not to protect children, trending in the wrong direction.
And I've also heard you call on the church to do something to confront this culture crisis, because so often it seems they are strangely quiet.
Last year, look, I'm a full-blown born-again believer. Jesus is my champion. And I'll tell you this, I can't look at the outside world if I don't first look at the church, the ones that have solutions. And the church has been silent. And I'll tell you why the church has been silent, predominantly on this. Because the church knows that, and the poll is over 45% of men in the church struggle with pornography. Not just view it, close to 60% view it regularly. 45% are addicted in the church, and the church is scared to death about this issue. Only 20% of the American church, regardless of your denomination, Catholic, Protestant, non-denominational, Baptist, it doesn't matter. Only 20% of American pastors in 2022 spoke of pornography from the pulpit. 20%. So yeah, where is the church in this conversation? Where is the church in the restorative care conversation? Yeah, no, it's time to wake up, because we think big government will fix this. Big government breaks stuff. They don't fix anything. We think law enforcement can arrest us out of this problem. You cannot arrest every predator. 45% of the men in the church are addicted to pornography, which is the entry drug. Every predator I've ever met or ever arrested with law enforcement or ever saw incarcerated, every single one of them were porn addicts. It starts with porn. It's a drug. And then it turns. Exploitation comes in. There's bitterness, there's hate. Hurt people hurt people. So they become the abuser. So Johnny, who's 8, who's addicted to porn, very likely at some point in his life, he's going to demand stimulation from another human being. It may look like a rape, or he would pay for it. And when the dopamine, the satisfaction the drug doesn't hit as strong anymore, they go younger. It's just the natural progression, and children suffer.
So troubling to hear, but you're right. People need to wake up to this, and I want to get to this, that people have a chance to hear you in person at the Rise for Hope event supporting women who are survivors of human trafficking. The annual free breakfast fundraiser for Terebinth Refuge, as you mentioned, in Waite Park. It's coming up September 14th. Registration is required, and people will also be able to watch Sex Nation. It's your documentary later in the evening. That is a ticketed event, $15 per person. A racy name, I know, for the documentary, with a little Q&A time after the film, and I know that was named that way on purpose. And before we go, I'm just hoping if you can give a bit of an overview of your film and the whole goal behind that.
Yeah, look, we take in the movie Sex Nation, it's a documentary, 45 expert interviews conducted, and not just Jaco's opinion, 28 years experience, law enforcement, the healthcare system, nurses, doctors, trauma-informed therapists, looking holistically at how did we get here? How did we get to be the number one nation on earth demanding sex with children? So we start the movie in 1933 with John Dewey signing the Humanist Manifesto. We work through Alfred Kinsey and the sexual experiments on children. We work through the Love is Love movement, and we bring it all the way to 2023. This is how we got here. You have to show people history. We have to learn where we made mistakes. We have to see, don't do that again. It doesn't work. And then there's a 2/3 of the movie is an incredible call to action, testimonies from amazing survivors that you can heal from this. We can end this. And in the last act of the movie is a big call to action with tangible things family members can do today in their own families to go fortify their family, get healing where healing is needed. You know, 1/3 of American women experience sexual abuse in their life. 1/3. And 98% of them never report it, never talk about it. They carry that hurt and that pain. How do I get redemption from this? If you think someone is being trafficked, what do I do? So the film is very important. It's titled Sex Nation because that's what we've become. You cannot be the leading nation exploiting children and not be a nation that's driven by sex. If we look at our culture today, everything is about the self. Me. Address me this way. Cater to my likes and dislikes. Change language and culture for me. It's not how life works. We're here to uplift others. We're here to invest in others. We're here by the Great Commission to see others set free. So it's a racy name, but it's what it is.
You're on Twitter, Instagram, and you mentioned your website. It's Jaco Booyens Ministries.org. So that's where people can find more information. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off here, Jaco?
No, I want to thank you. This is how we fight for families. What you're doing right now cannot be overstated. You are giving voice to something that is so pivotal to every listener's family, their children, their grandchildren, their family members. People are listening right now and they have suffered abuse and they are scared and they don't know where to go, or their husband's addicted to pornography, their marriage is falling apart. It's all connected. And on that website, a little easier link is helpjbm.org. They will find over 1,200 pieces of resource on that website for how to speak to their child, address the school principal, legislators, get out of porn for children, how to safeguard devices, phones. How do we run a family and keep the wolves at bay, right? And so thank you. God bless you.
God bless you right back. Jaco Booyens, thank you so much again for all you do.
Thanks.
And that'll do it for this episode of Collin Reports. We'll see you next time.